The Senator from James City County, Senator Norment.
I rise for a point of personal privilege, Mr. President.
Senator has the floor.
The proverbial echo that we hear reverberate across these chambers on many occasions. I had no intentions of speaking today, but I must say that I think a couple of the comments that were made earlier do not deserve but demand some response. The senator from Grayson started out his comments by saying that there are consequences for acts. Well, let me suggest to you there are consequences for public comments that are made on the floor of this Senate. And when I hear the term, quote, disgraceful police presence as characterizing our Virginia State Police and our Virginia Capitol Police, the most gentlemanly term that I can come up with to say is that is exceedingly disingenuous. And I say that particularly in light of those of us who work on the budget and work very closely in the subcommittee on public safety with law enforcement. Let me remind you that the Virginia Capitol Police and the Virginia State Police are charged by their very existence to protect the property and the people of the Commonwealth, and part of the people of the Commonwealth that they are charged with protecting are all 40 of us and all 100 people down the hall and the thousands of people that support us. And I can tell you, those protests or demonstrations, whatever you care to characterize them are not the only ones that law enforcement has been dealing with for quite some period of time on Capitol Square. There were suggestions that Occupy Richmond was going to try to take over the entire Capitol on the opening day of the session. As a result of that, there was a collaborative effort to put in a contingency plan to make sure that the capital of Virginia, its properties, and its people were not harmed and not disrupted in an uncivil manner. And those plans have been in existence for quite some period of time. And if you go back to one of the larger gatherings, the contingency plan that had been put in place in anticipation of the presence of literally thousands of people, men and women on both sides of the issue, was to have them stay on the perimeter of the Capitol. As a result of that, without consulting with the Virginia Capitol Police, those groups were invited on the Capitol grounds, which was not contemplated by our Capitol Police, and they responded spontaneously as best and as civilly as they can, realizing that a legislator had stepped over the plan that was in place. And then you talk about disgraceful police presence. Well, you know, I happen to be getting more than a couple of gray hairs in my head, not as many as the senior senator from Fairfax, but a few. And I happen to remember the 60s as well. And you know, there is the right of protest and there is the right of freedom of speech, but that right stops where my rights begin. The right of protest, the right of demonstration is there, but if in fact it becomes an operation of civil disobedience, then none of the 40 in here are charged with the responsibility of dealing with that on the site. It is those law enforcement people, and to say that they have a disgraceful presence is terribly disingenuous. Now, I suggest to you, you may not like the presence of it, and you may think that that is contributing to a public image that we find inconsistent with the positive image that we would like the Commonwealth of Virginia to have. But let me say this, there are some in this body that have done everything that they can to exacerbate the tarnishing of that public image based on social issues to try to deflect what they are not doing in other issues. And I suggest to you, if you think that that strategy is working, then I invite you once again to read the editorial that was in the Washington Post last Friday. Now, I suggest to you, while you may not like it, that we all accept responsibility for inflaming this. Some may not like some of the bills that are passed, but you know what? They are passed, they are gone, and they are in no way tied to the fiscal decisions that this body needs to make. And if you think it helps the public image by going on national TV and further contributing to put warts on the face of Virginia, then I find it somewhat disingenuous again to stand up on the floor of the Senate and talk about how horrible Virginia looks. And I think it's one thing to engage in political demagoguery, and it's another thing to engage in political discussions where we have a disagreement. But to lay that veil saying it is disgraceful on our law enforcement officers from the Virginia State Police and the Virginia Capitol Police, I just could not sit idly by and let that comment go by, because these men and women are not out there to try to frustrate the First Amendment rights or anyone. They are not out there to try to provoke something. And any of you that have ever been involved in any protest, no matter what it is, and I don't care whether it's a civil rights protest, a Vietnam protest, the Iran, Iraq, Middle East protest, or a social issue protest, one of the key strategies is bring and focus public attention on you. You want something to happen when that camera is there so that it gets memorialized and it gets out in the media. And in many instances, that is a very effective medium to get your message across. But I suggest to you, and I say this with great trepidation because I know the phone will be ringing and the emails will be zinging, and some bloggers, whatever the heck a blog is, will be blogging me on it. But I would say, Mr. President, I just think very simply that those comments were undeserving to our public safety officials and over the top.
Thanks, Senator.